The fluorescent lights of the exam hall always hummed a tune of pure dread. I remember that day so clearly. My palms were sweaty, not just from nerves about the scholarship exam, but from a deeper, gnawing anxiety that had become my constant companion. This exam, the Harrison Scholarship, it wasn't just a chance for a better education. It was a lifeline, a way to ease the crushing weight on my dad's shoulders. Please watch the full video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Give it a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. Lastly, share the video with your family and friends. Okay. Enjoy the story. My name is Lily, and back then I was 17. Most kids my age were worried about prom dates or what college party they'd sneak into. I was worried about whether Mom would remember my name when I got home. Mom. She used to be the brightest light in our house. Her laughter was like wind, chimes, her hugs could fix anything. But over the past year, that light had started to dim, flickering like a faulty bulb. It started with small things, forgetting where she put her keys, missing appointments, repeating stories. Dad and I brushed it off at first. "She's just tired," Dad would say, his voice a little too hopeful. But then it got worse. She'd get lost on her way back from the corner store, the one she'd walked to 1,000 times. She'd stare blankly at the stove, forgetting why she'd turned it on. The doctors finally gave it a name: early onset Alzheimer's. The words hung in the air of that sterile clinic room, heavy and suffocating. Mom cried, a quiet, lost sort of cry that broke my heart into a million pieces. Dad held her, his own face a mask of grief I'd never seen before. I just sat there, numb. We didn't tell anyone. Mom didn't want people to know, to pity her, or treat her differently. "It's our business, Lilybug," she'd said, one of her more lucid moments. So, we kept it quiet. Dad took on extra shifts at the factory to save for her care, his face growing more etched with worry lines each day. I took on everything else: cooking, cleaning, helping Mom get dressed, reminding her to take her medication, gently guiding her back when she'd wander off in her own mind. School became my escape, the one place I could almost pretend things were normal. And this scholarship, it was my chance to help, to take some of the financial burden off Dad. So there I was, in that exam hall. I'd studied for months. Every spare second I wasn't looking after Mom. I knew the material. But the pressure was immense. I remember looking up at the clock on the wall, trying to gauge my time. It was an old analog clock, and I squinted, my mind a bit fuzzy from lack of sleep. I'd been up late the night before because Mom had a bad night, restless and confused. I finished the exam feeling, okay. Not amazing, but okay. I'd done my best. A few days later, the whispers started. "Did you hear about Lily? She aced the Harrison. No way she did it honestly." I tried to ignore them. People could be jealous. Then, Mrs. Davison, my English teacher and one of the scholarship committee members, called me into her office. Her face was stern, her lips a thin, disapproving line. "Lily," she began, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "We need to talk about the scholarship exam." My heart hammered. "Okay," I managed, my voice small. "Several students, and indeed one, of the exam proctors reported seeing you, looking around quite a bit, specifically towards Mark Jensen's paper." Mark Jensen. He was smart, a bit arrogant, and sat 2 seats to my left. I barely registered him during the exam. "What?" "No," I said, shocked. I was looking at the clock, to check the time. It was above and sort of in that direction. Mrs. Davison raised an eyebrow. "The clock, Lily? You scored significantly higher than anyone expected. Higher than Mark, even. Some of your answers, particularly in the essay section, bear a striking resemblance to phrasing Mark has used in class." My mind reeled. Resemblance? I had my own voice, my own way of writing. "Mrs. Davison, I didn't cheat. I would never cheat. I studied so hard for this. My voice trembled. How could she think this? She knew me, or I thought she did. The evidence is compelling, Lily, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The committee has decided to put your scholarship on hold pending a further investigation. Frankly, we're leaning towards disqualifying you. The words hit me like a physical blow. Disqualified. Cheater. The room spun. All that work, all that hope, turning to ash. But I didn't, I pleaded, tears welling up. I promise you, I didn't. She just looked at me with cold disappointment. I'm sorry, Lily, but we have to maintain the integrity of the scholarship. I stumbled out of her office, tears streaming down my face. The hallway seemed to stretch for miles, lined with judging eyes. The whispers were louder now, no longer hushed but open, pointed. Cheater. The word followed me like a shadow. My best friend Sarah found me crying behind the bleachers. Lily, what's wrong? What happened? I couldn't tell her. I couldn't tell anyone about Mom. It was Mom's secret, Mom's dignity. So I just shook my head, muttering something about a bad grade. She knew I was lying, but she didn't push. The distance between us, though, felt like a chasm. Going home was a fresh wave of pain. Dad was already home, his face grim. Mrs. Davison had called. Lily, he said, his voice rough with a mixture of disappointment and confusion. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't cheat. I didn't, Dad. I swear, I cried, fresh tears spilling. I was looking at the clock. They're twisting it. He looked at me, searching my face. I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, and it cut me deeper than anything Mrs. Davison had said. My own father doubted me. Then why are they saying this, Lilybug? He asked, his voice softer now, full of a weary sadness. How could I explain the fog in my head that day? The exhaustion from being a part-time student and a full-time caregiver. The desperate need to do well, so intense it probably made me look anxious and shifty. How could I tell him all that without revealing Mom's secret, the one she guarded so fiercely? I couldn't. So I just cried harder. I don't know, Dad. I just don't know. The next few weeks were a special kind of hell. At school, I was a pariah. People who used to smile at me now looked away. Teachers treated me with a cool professionalism that felt like a constant reprimand. Mark Jensen paraded around like a conquering hero, the wronged party. The scholarship, my beacon of hope, was gone. At home, things were even harder. Mom was having more bad days than good. One afternoon, I came home to find her in the kitchen, trying to make tea, but she'd put the kettle on the counter without any water in it, the plastic starting to smell like it was burning. She was humming, oblivious. I gently took it from her, my heart aching. Mom, you need to put water in it first, remember? She looked at me, her eyes vacant for a moment, then a flicker of recognition. Oh, Lily, I forgot. She looked so small, so vulnerable. The strain was showing on Dad, too. He was working longer hours, coming home exhausted, the worry for Mom and now this shame about me weighing him down. The silence in our house was heavy, broken only by Mom's occasional confused chatter or my hushed attempts to comfort her. Felt like I was drowning. The accusation of cheating was a heavy weight, but the secret of Mom's illness was an anchor, pulling me under. I wanted to scream, to tell them all the truth, to make them understand. But Mom's wish for privacy, for dignity, held me back. One evening, Dad found me staring blankly at my textbooks, not a single word registering. He sat down beside me, his rough hand covering mine. Lily, he said quietly, I know you. I know your heart. I was upset, confused, but deep down, I believe you. I don't understand why this is happening. His words were a tiny crack of light in my darkness. Thank you, Dad, I whispered, leaning my head on his shoulder. We sat there in silence for a while, the unspoken truth about Mom hanging between us. He knew, of course. He knew how much I was juggling. He just didn't know how much it had affected me that day during that exam. The school called a final meeting. Me, my dad, Principal Thompson, Mrs. Davison, and even Mr. Henderson, the proctor who'd seen me. This was it, the official verdict. Walked into Principal Thompson's office feeling like a condemned prisoner. Dad squeezed my hand before we went in. Mrs. Davison avoided my gaze. Mr. Henderson looked uncomfortable. Principal Thompson started, "Lily, we've reviewed everything. The proctor's statement, Mrs. Davison's concerns about the similarities in the essays, your performance." He paused, and I braced myself. "While there's no concrete proof you copied Mark Jensen's answers directly, the circumstantial evidence is strong. The committee feels they cannot, in good conscience, award you the scholarship under these circumstances." The words, though expected, still stole my breath. I looked at Dad. His face was pale, but he looked at me with a sad resolve. Mrs. Davison finally spoke, her voice softer than before, but still firm. "Lily, if you had just been honest from the start, perhaps admitted to a moment of panic, of looking, we might have been able to find a different path. But the continued denial, a moment of panic. She still thought I was lying. Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in a kind of desperate exhaustion. The weight of it all, Mom, Dad, the scholarship, the lies by omission, the unfairness, it just became too much. Tears started to flow, not the hysterical tears of before, but slow, weary tears. "I wasn't panicking about the test," I said, my voice thick. "I wasn't looking at Mark's paper." I took a deep, shaky breath. I looked at Dad. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was permission. It was understanding. "I was looking at the clock," I repeated, my voice gaining a little strength. "Because I was worried about my mom." A confused silence filled the room. Principal Thompson frowned. "Worried about your mom? What does that have to do with the exam, Lily?" And then, it all came pouring out. My mom isn't well," I began, the words catching in my throat. "She has early onset Alzheimer's." I saw Mrs. Davison flinch. Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "It started over a year ago. It's gotten really bad. She needs constant care. She forgets things, she gets confused, she wanders. Dad works extra shifts to pay for her medication and to save for when things get worse. So I take care of her when he's at work. Before school, after school, nights." I explained. About the sleepless night before the exam. About Mom being agitated. I was exhausted. My head was foggy. I kept looking at the clock because I was worried about getting home to her, worried Dad would be late from his shift and she'd be alone, and confused for too long. I told them about the essay, how the themes of memory and loss, which were part of the prompt, resonated so deeply with me because of what I was living every single day. If my words sounded like anyone else's, it's because grief and worry aren't unique. Maybe Mark wrote about something similar from a book he read. I wrote about it from my life. The room was utterly silent. I could hear my own ragged breathing. I looked at Mrs. Davison. Her stern expression had crumbled. Her eyes were wide, filled with a dawning horror, and then, unmistakably, shame. Principal Thompson was looking down at his desk, his fingers steepled. Mr. Henderson was staring at me, his mouth slightly open. "We didn't tell anyone," I continued, my voice barely a whisper now. "Mom didn't want people to know. She didn't want pity. She wanted to keep her dignity. So I kept it a secret. Even when you all called me a cheater." The last word was laced with a pain so deep it surprised even me. Dad finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "My daughter has been carrying a burden that would break most adults. She has been a rock for her mother, for me. The thought that she would cheat. It's preposterous. This scholarship wasn't just for her. It was for us, for her mother. Mrs. Davison made a small, choked sound. Tears were openly streaming down her face now. "Oh, Lily," she whispered. "Oh, my dear girl. I am so sorry." She stood up, came around the desk, and knelt beside my chair. "I am so profoundly sorry. I judged you so harshly. I didn't see. I didn't think to ask if something else was wrong." Principal Thompson cleared his throat. He looked older somehow. "Lily," he said, his voice gentle. "Thank you for telling us, for trusting us with this. It must have been incredibly difficult." He looked at Mrs. Davison, then at Mr. Henderson. "It seems we owe you a very sincere apology. We were wrong." Mr. Henderson nodded, looking deeply ashamed. "Miss, I just saw you looking over a few times. I never imagined—" "I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air. It didn't magically fix everything. The pain of the accusation, the weeks of being an outcast, wouldn't just vanish. But it was a start. It was the truth, finally out in the open. And it was, as the title of this memory suggests, more powerful than they, or even I, had expected. "The scholarship committee will reconvene immediately," Principal Thompson said. "Given this new understanding, I am confident we can rectify this situation." The Harrison Scholarship was reinstated. There was a quiet announcement in assembly, a general apology for a misunderstanding without going into private details, though Mrs. Davison apologized to me personally again, with a sincerity that felt real. She even offered to help find resources for families dealing with Alzheimer's. Some of the whispers didn't stop entirely. Some people will always believe the worst, or perhaps they just felt awkward, knowing they'd misjudged so badly. Mark Jensen avoided me pointedly, which was fine by me. But Sarah, my dear Sarah, when she found out bits and pieces of the truth, she hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. "Oh, Lily, why didn't you tell me? I would have understood. I would have helped, and I knew she would have. But some burdens feel too personal to share, even with the closest of friends, until they simply become too heavy to carry alone." Life didn't suddenly become easy. Mom's illness continued its relentless progression. There were still good days, flashes of the woman she used to be, like sudden sunshine breaking through storm clouds. But the storm was always gathering. The scholarship money helped enormously, easing Dad's financial worries, allowing him to spend a little more time at home. But the biggest change wasn't the money or my cleared name. It was the understanding. It was the compassion I saw in Mrs. Davison's eyes every time she looked at me after that day. It was the way our small community, once they slowly learned snippets of our family's struggle, because secrets like that rarely stay completely hidden, especially when support is offered and accepted, rallied in small ways. A casserole left on the doorstep. An offer from a neighbor to sit with Mom for an hour so I could just breathe. They had called me a cheater. And for a while, that label had threatened to define me, to crush my spirit. But my truth, the quiet, painful, everyday reality of loving and caring for someone disappearing before my eyes, that truth had a power I hadn't understood. It wasn't a truth that shouted. It was one that whispered of resilience, of love, of a strength I didn't know I possessed until I had no other choice. It taught me that people can be quick to judge, to fill in the blanks with the worst possible assumptions. But it also taught me that people, when faced with the raw, vulnerable truth, are capable of immense empathy. My story wasn't about an exam, not really. It was about the invisible battles people fight every day, the silent weights they carry. And sometimes, just sometimes, sharing that weight, letting the truth be seen can be more powerful than anyone, even yourself, expects. It can change perceptions, it can heal rifts, and it can remind us all to look beyond the surface, to listen a little harder, and to lead with kindness, because you never truly know what someone else is going through. I learned that the hard way, but I also learned that even in the darkest of times, truth and the compassion it can inspire can be a light. The years that followed were filled with their own unique challenges and quiet victories. Mom's condition meant that my college experience was different from most. I chose a university close to home, juggling classes and assignments with my ongoing role as a caregiver. Dad and I became an even tighter team, supporting each other through the heart-wrenching process of watching Mom slowly fade. There were days I wanted to give up, days the grief felt too heavy, the future too bleak. But then I'd remember that, meeting in Principal Thompson's office, the shift in the room when the truth came out. It wasn't just about being believed about the exam. It was about being seen, truly seen, in all my messy, complicated reality. Mrs. Davison became an unexpected source of support. She'd check in, not just about academics, but about how I was doing, how Mom was. She'd share articles, she'd read about Alzheimer's research or caregiver support groups. It was never intrusive, always gentle. Her initial misjudgment had transformed into a genuine, almost fierce protectiveness and respect. It was a testament to her own character that she didn't just try to forget her mistake but actively worked to make amends in a meaningful way. Sarah remained my rock. Once the dam of secrecy had broken, our friendship deepened. She didn't always know what to say, but she knew how to listen, how to just be there. She'd come over and we'd watch silly movies while Mom napped, or she'd help me with chores, her presence a comforting normality in my often chaotic world. She learned to navigate Mom's good days and bad days with a grace that touched me deeply. The scholarship did more than just pay for tuition. It was a symbol. It reminded me that my hard work hadn't been in vain, that my dreams, though perhaps altered by circumstance, were still valid. It also, in a strange way, gave me a platform. Other students, hearing vaguely about my difficult home situation, sometimes sought me out if they too were struggling with unseen burdens. I found I could offer a listening ear, a word of encouragement, because I understood what it felt like to be drowning in silence. The memory of being called a cheater never fully faded. It left a scar, a sensitivity to judgment, a wariness. But it also forged a kind of resilience. I learned to trust my own integrity, even when others doubted it. I learned that my worth wasn't defined by their accusations, but by my actions, my love, my truth. When Mom finally passed away, years later, the grief was immense, a hollow ache in my chest. But intertwined with the sadness was a profound sense of peace. We had done our best for her. We had loved her fiercely to the very end. And in her own way, through her illness, she had taught me so much about strength, compassion, and the incredible power of unspoken love. At her funeral, Mrs. Davison was there. She hugged me, her eyes filled with tears. "Your mother would have been so proud of the woman you've become, Lily," she said. And in that moment, the last vestiges of that old hurt seemed to dissolve. I often think back to that day in the exam hall, the hum of the lights, the weight of expectation. If I could tell my 17-year-old self anything, I'd tell her that this trial, this unfair accusation, would eventually lead to a deeper understanding of herself and the world. I'd tell her that her truth, though painful to reveal, would ultimately be a source of strength and connection. The world can be a harsh place, quick to label, quick to condemn. But I've learned that beneath the surface, most people are just trying to navigate their own complexities, their own hidden sorrows. The story of the cheater became for me a story about the vital importance of empathy. It taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to dare to share your vulnerability, to trust that your truth, in all its rawness, can bridge divides and open hearts. And so I carry that lesson with me. I try to look beyond the easy assumptions, to listen for the unspoken stories. Because everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. My battle was fought in the quiet rooms of my home, in the hushed tones of doctors' offices, and in the silent screams of a teenage girl trying to hold her world together. And when that battle spilled out, messy and uninvited, into the sterile confines of a principal's office, it turned out that my truth, the simple, heartbreaking truth of a daughter loving her fading mother, was indeed more powerful than anyone, especially me, had ever expected. It didn't just clear my name, it cleared a path for a more compassionate way of seeing and being seen. And that, I believe, is a truth worth telling.